Hi everyone, my name is Jamie Madolo. I am a reliability engineer here at Hemlock Semiconductor. A couple years back when I graduated from Michigan Tech, I was given the opportunity to move back to the area I grew up in and work alongside my dad, Mike Madolo, who's a supply and logistics manager here. It was very important for me when looking for my first job to find a company that really focused on sustainability and expanding on clean energy, and I think we're really lucky to have a company like HSC here in the Great Lakes Bay region that does that. If Congress passes new incentives for the solar industry, that would not only create clean energy jobs for young professionals in our community, but it would also help out the nation. I would now like to introduce A.B. Ghosh. So A.B. started here at Hemlock Semiconductor this past fall as our Chief Operating Officer, and then in January he transitioned over to our CEO. So I'll now pass it off to A.B.
Thank you, Jamie. Yeah. Thank you for kicking us off. Thank you for your kind introduction. People like you really make this place a special place. So thank you for being here and all the work you do for us. So to all of you here, welcome to Hemlock Semiconductor. A very warm, special welcome to Secretary Granholm and Congressman Kildee. It's great to have both of you back here in Michigan, and for all the support you've given this Hemlock business and our employees and our company over the last 20 years. So we've been here since 1961. We've been being the world leader in polysilicon manufacturing. And with the help of 1,200 employees today, we make polysilicon, which goes into the semiconductor and solar industries. We are building the clean energy future in Michigan. As you know, today the state and the country is at a very important inflection point with transitioning to clean energy. And that is why this visit of Secretary Granholm and Congressman Kildee is very important and timely for us here today. They're taking action at the federal level to support the solar energy through the Solar Energy Manufacturing for America Act, SEMA for short. This act will create good-paying manufacturing jobs right here in Michigan and create a resilient solar supply chain in America, thereby lowering the solar energy costs for consumers and help fight climate change. The manufacturing tax incentives in this legislation will allow Hemlock and the rest of the solar energy participants in the supply chain to expand domestic production and thereby supply the domestic demand for 100% American solar panels. So all of us here at Hemlock are eager to play a part in helping America transition to the clean energy, help fight climate change, and help create a robust domestic supply chain for solar energy. We believe this is economic, environmental, and national security imperative for America. Again, we're so happy to have your support. With that, I'll turn it over to Congressman Kildee, who is the main sponsor of the Solar Energy Manufacturing for America Act in the House of Representatives. Without your support, we would not have made as much progress as we have so far.
Thank you, A.B. Thank you so much. And thank you to Jamie and all the folks here at Hemlock Semiconductor. I was just here a few weeks ago, and I'm just impressed by the people who are here. And it's always great to welcome Secretary Granholm back home. You have seen the future when you were governor. You began investing in it, and now as Secretary of Energy, you're making it reality in ways that are really good for this country and good for people who want to work hard and have a future. Michigan has always led, of course, we know that. We've been innovators for our entire existence, and this is no exception. And that's why companies like Hemlock Semiconductor are so important to us, generating the kind of good-paying jobs that allow people, again, to raise their family. People like Jamie here, right in our home state, making us as productive as we can be, helping create the material necessary for solar panels that help power homes and businesses, and lower costs for consumers. According to the U.S. Department of Energy, and I know people there, half of the electricity generated in the U.S. by 2050 could come from solar energy if we make the right investments. That saves the average consumer thousands of dollars a year, and obviously it's good for the planet. This last couple of years have been tough. The pandemic has shown us that we can't rely on manufacturers overseas for critical elements, critical items like semiconductors or polysilicon. And of course, with the recent invasion of Ukraine by Russia and their efforts to weaponize energy, now is the time for us to heed that lesson and invest in energy independence in our own energy future, including clean energy. By bringing critical manufacturing back to the U.S. and back to our home state, we can fix our broken supply chains, lower energy costs for consumers, and accelerate this transition, this important transition to an American-made green energy future. And that's why earlier this year I introduced the Solar Energy Manufacturing Act to support domestic solar panel production. We can do that right here by creating the right incentives for every step of the domestic solar manufacturing supply chain. We can ensure the long-term growth of America's solar industry. We can create good-paying jobs right here in Michigan. We can reduce emissions that threaten the Great Lakes and secure energy independence for this country. This legislation, my bill, will bring the entire solar supply chain from the beginning to end back here, back to Michigan, back to the U.S., by providing the tax incentives that level the global playing field. We can meet these climate goals, these aggressive but important climate goals. We can only do so intentionally. It won't happen by itself. It happens when we have policymakers, and industry that understand that we have to choose this future and make it happen. And like I said at the outset, a person who's known that for a long time, when she was governor, saw this future, began to invest in it, and now is a member of the president's cabinet leading this transition. And it's just so great to have you back. Secretary Jennifer Granholm.
Thank you, my friend. All right. Thank you, Dan. So it's great to be home. It's great to be with you. Your leadership has been amazing. This Solar Energy Manufacturing Act is a critical component of what the president wants to see happen as he talks about building supply chains in America. Anybody who watched the State of the Union knows that he has got a relentless focus on making sure we are building it here, and he's not afraid to put policy behind building it here. Anybody who's been in Michigan knows that for decades we stood by the side and watched these global trade policies take jobs away. And, you know, this president is sick of that. And he's saying no more. We're going to build it in America. We're going to stamp it, made in America. We're going to use it here, and we're going to export it across the world. We can put our workers. You guys are growing here at Hemlock Semiconductor. You're hiring American workers to make American components for solar panels, the hyper-pure polycrystalline silicon that they make right here is a critical component for that growing solar industry. And honestly, this is, for me personally, this is just such a great story. I was earlier today at Excel, and they are making batteries for this clean energy future. This clean energy future, this energy sector, will create millions of jobs across America if we bring that supply chain home. We know that the Chinese really big-footed the U.S. with respect to solar over, in the few years ago, and we lost a lot of that capacity. You know it well at Hemlock Semiconductor, and we're saying no more. We want that back. The Chinese and the Asians also cornered the market on batteries for electric vehicles, and we're saying no more. We want to build the full supply chain here, because that full supply chain means jobs in America. So, the bipartisan infrastructure law, thank you very much for supporting, not only means that Michigan will get almost $8 billion for fixing the damn roads and bridges. It not only means that Michigan will get $100 million to lay broadband across the state, it not only means that Michigan will get $110 million for electric vehicle charging stations all over Michigan. It not only means that Michigan will get $100 million for $1 billion for transit all across the state, but it means that the supply chains are going to come back to Michigan. $7 billion for the battery supply chain. And if we get this next step, which is the tax credits and the manufacturing tax credits, as well as the tax credits for production of solar and wind and other clean energy, the sky's the limit. It's really exciting. And honestly, this issue of manufacturing in America, there are folks who support this on both sides of the aisle. We have great hope that we are going to be able to get this through Congress, and especially because of what we're seeing right now. Globally, this energy insecurity, you're seeing the price of gas, right? Putin's war and Putin's control over oil markets, at least but being the largest exporter of oil, has caused such volatility that we are all paying more at the pump. If we weren't so reliant, if the globe wasn't so reliant on oil from countries that are petrostates or that don't have our interests at heart, we need to make our own means of energy supply, whether it's transportation energy or energy to power our homes and buildings. We need to make it here in America. And so that is what the president is focused on. When Michigan was on its knees because the auto industry was in bankruptcy, when I was governor, we decided that we had to diversify and move in new directions and add electric vehicles to our economic strategy. This region of Michigan has led and will continue to lead. Michigan is tough. We gut it out. And, you gutted it out because Hemlock was hurting when that solar supply chain went overseas. And you've gutted it out. And now you're back. And that's true with Xcel Energy as well, the battery company. So I'm just so grateful to be here on the backside of that phoenix that's rising from the ashes. Michigan is leading. People are back to work. It's very exciting to be back and know that you've got an ally in the Biden administration to make that happen. Questions?
You talked a little bit about going green come 2050. So will these solar panels be distributed to businesses, to homes? How does that work, and what will it cost to the consumer?
Well, first of all, solar is the cheapest form of energy. It's free, right? So we want to get, and we're continuing to drive down the cost of solar as well from a technology point of view. Solar panels can be anywhere, even in colder climates. Michigan gets a lot of its renewable energy from wind, but it could as well from solar, because the next generation of the technology is very efficient and can make sure that solar can be derived. It's really more about light. So bottom line is, solar is a solution all across the country. The president has a goal, though, of getting to 100% clean electricity by 2035. And that means we have to add gigawatts of clean energy to our transmission grid. We've got to expand the size of the transmission grid to take that on. So this is why it is such a huge opportunity. But it's not just the U.S. that's doing it. Of course, other countries are doing it as well, are making those kind of commitments. And so that means the solar supply chain that's here in Michigan can also be supplying not just the U.S., but other nations who are also making these similar commitments. And it is for businesses, for homes, you name it. Solar is a solution.
And Congressman Kildee, where does this bill stand in Congress? Where is it headed? When could we see this come to fruition?
So we've introduced the legislation. I'm leading the bill. We have the same legislation introduced in the Senate. Senators Warnock and Ossoff from Georgia have introduced the same legislation along with others, including our own state U.S. senators. I'm on the Ways and Means Committee. It's a tax incentive, and so when we have a tax plan ready to go, we have a number of pieces of tax policy that we need to address. We hope to have this done this year and get it in place. But this is something that it does require people reaching out to their members of Congress. It's clear this is the right policy, but we need to make sure that members of Congress across the country understand how essential this is for us to have energy independence. And so I'm optimistic, but we are still going to have to build public support, and we're working on that.
Other questions?
Secretary, on a different topic, how is the revoking most favored nation trade status with Russia, how is that going to affect businesses like Hemlock Semiconductor? Is it going to have a negative effect, a positive effect?
Well, the issue is related to Russia, right? And so I'm not sure how much business you are doing in Russia. It probably won't impact them that much. But we think it is important, really important, to stand with Ukraine and to stand with other nations in saying this is an unjust and despicable war that is waged by a despot. And so we are doing everything possible, taking every possible step to be able to isolate him and the oligarchs that surround him, and to get through this, hopefully, quickly. We don't know when it's going to end, but we would like to accelerate the finish.
Any other questions? Secretary, you mentioned to oil and gas companies to start producing more. Have you made any calls to them personally and asked them to start producing more? We know that Russia produced roughly 5% of America's oil, but where do we stand today on that?
Yeah, I have spoken with them directly. I just came from an oil and gas conference in Houston where they all were, as well as me speaking with them individually. And let me just be clear, this is the world is on an emergency footing because of war. So we have to replace the Russian exports. They export about 7.5 million barrels per day. And so as a world, we've got to replace that, or these prices will continue to go up. And so the question is, where can we do that? And we've asked our domestic suppliers to do that. We have looked at, and we have released oils from our nation's strategic petroleum reserve. We've released just last week about 60 million barrels. But there's more that has to be done. We're asking other countries to do the same so that we're all in this together, increasing supply in the short run. But ultimately, we have to walk and chew gum at the same time, and that means we've got to, as well, build out this clean energy future. And that is the medium and long-term strategy so that we don't find ourselves in this again. We want to electrify our vehicles. We want to make sure that we reduce our consumption of oil. We produce it ourselves, but we also want to move to non-fossil fuel solutions that don't have us relying upon others.
Kind of a social question, because a lot of this is focusing on funding for the solar programs. But regardless of how much funding is going towards these programs, what's the plan to help convince the staunch community that is against, say, solar or even electric vehicles, like sold on the oil and gas?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's in a different place. We understand that. You can't force people. I mean, ultimately, though, I think people respond to price. And so if solar is the cheapest form of energy right now, and I mean, just as an example, I drive a Chevy Bolt. That Chevy Bolt is plugged into my garage. I have solar panels on the roof of my garage. I'm lucky to be able to do that. I lease the solar panels. I lease the Bolt. If I had to fill up the engine, I'm not sure how many gallons it is in the tank, but let's say the average is 15. It would cost me, if I had to fill it up at a gas station, it would cost me $65 maybe today. If I plug it into my garage, it would cost about $12 to go the same distance. So that is a huge savings. And so I think money talks, and once people see the impact and the savings that everyday citizens can achieve, I think that will have a big impact, regardless of people's political stripes, et cetera. Talking to people around them, if they've experienced it, I think that will ultimately be the biggest selling point.
Okay, thank you so much.
Great.
Thank you all.